welcome back to our final Facebook Live session at Lancaster University. Just a quick recap, I'm Jess, so I'll be hosting the session today. We've got Mike in the background who'll be putting some links, so do keep an eye on those in the comments below. And today we're going to be discussing about studying philosophy with Neil Manson today. Neil, would you like to introduce yourself and your role here at Lancaster?
Right, so I'm a philosopher. I do stuff in applied philosophy to do with consent, medical ethics, biobank consent, amongst other things. I also teach epistemology, history of philosophy, a bit of philosophy of mind, so a range of things. But I'm also admissions tutor for philosophy, which means that I sort of oversee the open days, the admissions procedures, and the prospectuses and so on for philosophy and other bits of the department, but it's mainly philosophy as mine.
Brilliant. So that'll give you a chance to ask some questions about a couple of those things, about admissions and applying to it and studying some of these topics. As we have the past couple of sessions, we've got a couple of questions here that we can rely on, and I'll also be following the Facebook Live on my phone and on the iPad here, so if you do send in any questions, we'll make sure to answer those. So shall we get started with the first question then, out from here, which looks like it's going to be... what kind of activities and reading opportunities could young people get involved in now to boost their interest in a subject? So things that they might be able to put in a personal statement, or things just to explore philosophy a little bit more?
The main thing about philosophy this might sound a bit odd, and don't tell your teachers, but it's not so much what you've read, but it's more how you think about what you read.
Okay.
So you can read a newspaper in a kind of reflective way where you're asking questions about, well, does it have to be the case? Why do people say these things, and so on? Now, there's lots of, go to Amazon, go to your local bookshop, and there are lots of good introductions to philosophy out there. There are lots of good popular philosophy books that will get you sort of into things, but it's much more important, rather than seeing it as, how do I learn about the subject before I go to university?
Yeah.
It's more about thinking, what do I think about the world? What things puzzle me? What things do I want to know more about? Okay. And thinking about your life and about the things in it, and which things make sense, which things are puzzling. Now, some of those things might be scientific questions. You think, well, how do toenails grow? That's kind of that's a question for a medical student or a biologist. But if you've got questions about, say, you're thinking about something as simple as friendship. Think about friendship. You think, well, actually, why is friendship important? And what happens if there's a conflict between friendship and jobs? What kind of person would I be? Or you might be in the queue to your burger bar, and your friends wants a beef burger, and you don't eat meat, and you start having an argument. But then you have to think, well, hang on, one person saying I should eat meat, the other person saying I shouldn't. But why shouldn't I eat meat? And why should? And those kinds of questions give rise to other questions. And if you arrive at university with that kind of questioning attitude, that's going to help. Right. And in terms of, I can talk about personal statements now, or talk about them later, but personal statements, whatever subject you want to do at university, getting across your interest in and passion for the subject is key. Different universities use personal statements in different ways, but we could maybe talk about that in a bit, because I think there might be a question on that in there. Yes. But in terms of getting across passion for the subject, now, typically an admissions tutor is not going to expect you to say, I have read all these great works of philosophy and I'm willing to talk about them at length. It might be something as simple as, well, I've read this popular book on philosophy, or something on the history of philosophy, and I was really struck by this idea. Or you can even say, I'm really bothered about the question of, do animals have rights? Should animals have the same kind of rights as humans? Or I'm really worried about the question to do with the ethics of climate change and holding people responsible for things that happen to future generations. Something which says, I'm thinking about the world, I'm really interested in things, and I want to go to university to learn more.
Right.
No admissions tutor expects, maybe in some subjects, maths or something, but you've got to be at a certain level before you can sort of begin. But a subject like philosophy, it's about, I'm really interested in things. I don't just want to be given the answers, because I want to think. I want to think things through myself. That's what I want to be doing, and I want help to do that, to learn to do it, and to engage with other thinkers from history and contemporary philosophy. That's what you're kind of looking for in a personal statement.
So there's not necessarily like a checklist of things you need to have read, beforehand to have an interest in philosophy. It's more the how you think and respond and raise questions.
Not for philosophy, because philosophy, most of our students have only done either a small amount of philosophy or maybe no philosophy.
Right.
Because schools and sixth forms these days, philosophy, a lot of schools don't offer it, or when schools or heads of six are encouraging people to take just 3 A levels, they're like, well, don't do philosophy, or person's not teaching philosophy this year because the school's got cuts. So philosophy is one of those subjects that if a school's on the squeeze, alongside all the interesting things, art and German or something, philosophy's on the as well as maths, history, English are going to stay there in the middle. So we don't expect or require people to have done philosophy beforehand. If someone has done philosophy, it's not going to penalise them. But what I always say to students at open days is, if you have done philosophy, it's really important that when you arrive at university, whether you come here or go somewhere else, that you kind of start afresh.
Right.
Particularly because some students, not all schools do this, but some schools teach philosophy by a method of learn these bullet points and this will get you through the exam.
Yeah.
And then there's a certain kind of student, if they've done really well, they turn up, they go, yeah, I got an A. I don't even need to do the first year, I'm so good. And what they don't realise is that, well, that might have worked at A level, but from the moment you arrive at university, the expectation is we want to see you, whatever level you're at, thinking, engaging, doing work, doing your own work, research, getting into, we help you and support you, but to simply go, aha, here's the 5 bullet points that will get me my top mark, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So that student has to do a kind of reorientation. Whilst in some ways the student who hasn't done any philosophy, because they don't have their assumption that they're already brilliant. So it's just, if you're out there and you're doing really well, ask, am I being taught? Some school teachers are brilliant, and it's about getting students to think and getting them to carefully and critically argue. But some teachers, they may be a geography teacher or a history teacher, has been told, you can go do some philosophy. So they end up going, blimey, I've got to get these students through this exam. How am I going to do it? Get them to memorise the syllabus.
Right, okay. So it's quite, it says it's nice to think of it as sort of starting afresh, and it's good to see that students can do that. And we'll maybe talk a little bit about the transition from school into university in a couple of questions after. Brilliant. So if you have just joined us, we've just been chatting a little bit about what kind of activities and reading you could get involved in now to boost your interest in philosophy, and maybe that could be put in your personal statement. And we've sort of decided that that's down to you really. It's about developing how you think and thinking of those questions. So do watch back if you are tuning in after the live session. But we'll move on to the next question. Here we go. Next up, we've got the question: what kind of research takes place in the department, and how does that impact the course?
So we're a big department of politics, philosophy, religious studies and international relations. Okay. International relations doesn't get its word in the title because it makes it too long. Yes, so on the philosophy side of the department, we have people with a wide range of interests, both in terms of what they do their research in and what they teach. But we are a sort of group of 10, 12, depending on how you count people, because some people sort of overlap with other areas and are philosophers and also do religious studies, or are philosophers and also do politics. Yeah. But one of the distinctive things about philosophy here is that at least half the people who do philosophy do applied philosophy. Right. So not all of philosophy is applied philosophy. Some philosophy is very abstract, and it might be about the nature of time or the nature of causation. And it's not going to, or the philosophy of mathematics. Are numbers real? Are numbers real in the way that tables and chairs are real, or if they are real in a different way, what sense of real is that? Now, that can be really, really interesting and engaging and fascinating, but there's no presupposition that any of that stuff gets kind of applied back to the world. Right. The stuff we do, that a lot of us do in the department, is actually tied much more into things that go on in the world in terms of the law, in terms of policy. Right. So the stuff I do on consent, so I've been on NHS task forces, I'm on the Medical Research Council's Ethical Committee, Ethics Research and Public Engagement Committee. A colleague, Steve Wilkinson, who was actually years ago a student here, who
great.
has come back many years later now as a
Nice.
professor of philosophy. And he's got a really interesting project working, so he's a philosopher, but he's also working with a lawyer and then a team of philosophers and lawyers, sort of younger philosophers and lawyers,
Right.
on the laws on gamete donation. So the law is very much geared to the legal rights and obligations that parents have with regard to children on the assumption that there's two parents. But these days, with advances in biotechnology, you can have up to 4 people contributing material or part of the process of making a child. Now the question is, so if you've got some part of the DNA donated by one person into the egg of another person, which is then implanted in a person, a surrogate mother, who has rights over the offspring?
Yeah.
And who has responsibilities? The law doesn't tell you, because the law is designed for a time when parents came in at most 2.
Yeah.
So that's part of his project, is drawing upon his philosophical expertise, working with lawyers to engage with that kind of problem. Now, other people in the department work on different issues in philosophy of psychiatry, in the ethics of childhood obesity and policy and so on. So there's lots of different areas that people work in. Now, how does that feed back into teaching? Well, it feeds in different ways. So sometimes it feeds in as part of a course. So in my course, for example, on epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge, some of that is quite abstract stuff, but then there's also other stuff which is linked to things that I've published or written about the importance of not seeking knowledge and why sometimes it's really important to sort of not inquire into things, which sounds a bit old, but that's a kind of application of. So that's not the whole course. That's just part of that course. Whilst in the 3rd year we have sort of more specialised modules which academics use to sort of focus on stuff that's more closely tied to their research. Now those may vary from year to year. So Steve Wilkinson, the guy who does the gamete donation project, he has a module on stuff to do with future generations and children's rights and biomedical ethics that sort of draws upon that. So it can feature in as part of the course, or because these things, the stuff that's kind of heavily related to your research, isn't the stuff you want students to be doing when they first arrive. When people first arrive, you want people to be getting up to speed with certain philosophical ideas, certain philosophical techniques, and it's only when you've sort of done quite a bit of philosophy that you're then in a position to sort of engage with the kind of, well, for us to get you to go through the sort of more detailed stuff that's going on in a specific project or topic that we're working on. So the first year is very much introductory. The second year is very much kind of consolidating key areas of philosophy, and it's really when you get into the 3rd year that it'd be more opportunity to work on things that we in the department are specifically working on in our sort of day-to-day research. The stuff we do in our research does show up elsewhere, and that's also true. So alongside being having expertise in applied philosophy, we have people who do Indian philosophy, Islamic philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, and so on. So that's their area of research, and they have their teaching is on that as well. So it's kind of, and not most universities in the UK don't offer you that. So you'd have to go and do you do kind of European philosophy or English-speaking philosophy in some cases, rather than that sort of more global perspective on philosophy. So the short answer is it comes in various ways, but it comes in more the further on you go.
All right. So as you get into your 3rd year, you can sort of specialise a little bit more.
And then just to say, one area that it really can come in quite heavily is that in the 3rd year, students have the opportunity to do a dissertation. Working over 2 terms, 10,000 words. Now, it's a good. I mean, you can choose your tutor, you can choose your topic, but clearly it's a good idea to choose a topic that somebody's got some expertise in. Because then you're meeting up with somebody who knows, maybe knows more than anyone else in the world about that thing, on a regular basis, to go through your ideas and to discuss them, and then for them to help you do your 10,000 word draft. You don't have to do it on something that's, because we've got the stuff we teach, the stuff we know about, that may not be stuff we're currently doing research on. But it's good if there is that kind of connection.
And then they're able to make the most of that expertise and specialism that is there. Brilliant. Great. So for those of you who've just joined us, just been chatting a little bit about what kind of research and topics that are taking place in this course, and we've been chatting about how you can go into certain specialisms as you get through the years at university. Brilliant. We'll move then on to the next question. What we've got coming up next is it's talking about sort of previous students. So what are your previous students doing now? I know we've heard from one of them, who's currently teaching.
Yeah. I didn't think of him as a
yeah.
he is a
But yeah, a previous student in philosophy, what kind of things do they go into?
Right, if you come to an open day, open day in the summer, or if you apply here and come to an applicant visit day, UCAS applicant visit day, I have slides with some stuff on it. it's like pictures and all sorts of things. Anyway, so a few years, because this question quite reasonably comes up at open days where both applicants and parents say, well, what do people want to do? So I asked our sort of central university alumni office that keeps in touch with former students, can you send me a list of some of the things that our former students have now gone on to do? And they sent me a list. I won't read out all of it, but I'll just pick out some. Because we could have set up the slide. Turn it around. We could have that on there. Anyway, so here, director BBC, accountant, NHS senior manager, solicitor, registrar, company director, head teacher, head of marketing, business systems analyst, HR consultant, global director of logistics, acquisitions manager, senior account manager, economist, project director, production controller, national campaigns manager, corporation tax specialist, marketing executive, legal media rights executive, tax compliance director, systems coordinator, editor BBC, again, that's a different one, tax manager. Now you may, actually, a couple of things that have come up at open days that people have noticed in this, there's not really much of a pattern, but you'll be going, well, hang on, why are there so many people doing tax? And did you say accountant and lawyer? Which might seem a bit odd if you've done a philosophy degree, how come you're going to be an accountant or a lawyer? Well, the reason for that is that each year, usually one or two, but sometimes more, of our students will do a conversion course, which is a 9-month or 10-month conversion course, which takes your philosophy degree, and then you work really, really, really hard to convert your philosophy degree or to transform your philosophy degree into an accountancy degree. Actually, you're not convert it because you keep your philosophy degree, but you now get the graduate base for registration to sort of go on to the next stage of being a lawyer, as if you had a law degree, or to continue the next stage of training as an accountant, as if you had an accountancy degree. So that's why it's explaining the oddity of, well, hang on, you've done philosophy, but you're a lawyer or a tax inspector or an accountant. That's because some students, but a minority of students, will do those conversion courses after they've graduated. The other students, financial analyst, business application manager, scriptwriter, architect, head of brand language at BT, and another tax inspector somewhere else. There's no pattern, but I mean the thing we talk about this at open days, is the skills you get from studying philosophy are clearly relevant to any graduate job, because you're being taught to think carefully and critically, and to communicate carefully and critically, and to write and edit and organise your thoughts in a careful and formal manner. And any graduate job is going to require those skills. The other important thing to bear in mind at this stage, if you're thinking about next year or 2 years down the line, what should I study at university, is if you're thinking, well, hang on, some jobs look like they are tied to an obvious career. If I go and do a law degree, well, I'm probably going to go into the law, and not dentistry and so on. I mean, it's going to push you in a certain direction. Philosophy, on the other hand, is kind of open, but 50% of graduate jobs are open to people from any discipline. The really, really important thing, particularly these days, in terms of getting a job, is to do well. So if you're going into the job market, whatever that might be in 3, 5, 4 years' time, and you've got a 2-2 in something that's got the word business management or something in it, or a first in philosophy, the first in philosophy is going to see you, and that's something really narrow like dentistry, where you have to have that thing to do that job. Having a very good degree from a good university is going to get you further up the non-specific job chain than having a lower class mark or a lower qualification, even though it's in something that looks as if it's got kind of job written on it. So the underlying point there is, do something that you enjoy because if you don't enjoy it at university, it's really hard to do well.
Great.
It really is, because unlike school, unlike college, where you are monitored and everything's sort of kept under quite a tight leash, at university, there's lectures, seminars and so on, exams, feedback on those, tutors, but most of the work you're doing on your own. And if you're getting up in the morning and thinking, yeah, I really don't like the subject I've chosen, it's very hard to go off to the library or to get onto your computer and start working. Even if you're thinking, at the end of all this, it's the path to a good job. Well, if that's the path to a good job and you're not enjoying it, it sounds like maybe you've not made quite the right decision. But whether you study philosophy or study anything else, the key is, if you're going to study another subject, going to study English or Russian or something, if you really enjoy that, then you're much more likely to do well in it.
Brilliant. Yeah, and it seems like, as you mentioned, for those of you who've just joined in, we've just been chatting about what previous students of philosophy are doing now. And, there's an extensive list there from lots of different type of sectors, but it sounds like the career routes afterwards are quite open, and it's your chance to study something that you enjoy and use that as a platform and a springboard on something else.
Just on that, another thing just to bear in mind is in various... So the government wants to keep track of how well universities are doing. And so universities are measured in all sorts of different ways. And one of the measures is how many of your students are in a graduate job 6 months after graduation. Now, the category of graduate job is in itself a really, really odd one. So a clown is a graduate job, for example, but a circus manager isn't.
Right.
There's all some really weird stuff getting in there. But the much more problematic thing is it's measured at 6 months. Now, I did philosophy obviously as an undergraduate. I have friends who've gone on to be things like commissioning editor for art at Channel 4. Another friend who was CEO of Virgin Global Media. But both of them, 6 months after graduating, were in graduate jobs.
Right.
One of them, actually, 5 years after graduating, he was teaching English in Portugal. And then, but he was first in philosophy. Both of them were first in philosophy. But they had the ability and they had the degree in their back pocket, as it were, but they didn't go here 6 months, I'm suddenly in a graduate job. And that's true of a lot of people, because obviously I know philosophers that I studied with 25 years ago, that lots of people, they've done very well and have very interesting lives, but it doesn't follow they were doing what they're doing now 6 months after they graduated.
Right, okay.
So, and that's not just true here. So for things like law and medicine and other things which have a very sort of clear career structure, that measure might be quite useful. But for things, if you're doing English or history or philosophy or politics, it's often the case that people will end up, what they study, it will be relevant to what they do later in life, but it doesn't show up at that point when you're taking a little slot. So it's, take those statistics with and actually there's some weird things. In some civil service jobs, if you get promoted, you go from being in a graduate job to not being in a graduate job.
Right, so the way things are defined is maybe not as predictable as you might think. Brilliant, that's a great point to cover. Great, so we'll move on now from sort of looking at graduate jobs and what previous students are doing now to another question. I'm not sure what might come up. Let's have a look. Great, so this question is a little bit about advice to the target audience that we tend to work with. So for young people who are maybe studying their GCSEs and they may be unsure about what kind of subject they'd like to study, what's your advice to those people? Now, you've said a couple of things there about choosing things that you enjoy, but what would you have to
I think that still applies if you're thinking of, obviously these days you're going to be limited by your school or college. That's going to be, or not just by what they offer, but in terms of their timetabling restrictions. So you might decide, I really want to do English and maths, but lots of schools have a thing where it's like, well, you either go down the kind of, we timetable maths and sciences like this, we timetable English, history, humanities, geography over here like this. You have to decide which route you're going down.
Right.
Not all schools and colleges do that, but some do.
Yeah.
In which case, what that does is it's forcing your hand at quite an early stage, far too early a stage. But you really then have to think about what are the things that I enjoy doing when I see my life going forward. Do I see myself as someone who loves working with numbers, loves doing experiments, loves learning about the natural world, and isn't all that bothered about reading? I'm interested in people, understanding the nature of the social environment, social geography, urban geography. Something else again, but you might think that's what I want to do. But if it's GCSEs, obviously you're going to be including a wide range of things, and most schools are going to make you do the same things as everybody else, and then you've got some space for your options.
Yeah.
When you get onto your A levels, really it's do the things that you're passionate about, the things that are interesting, of the things that are available.
Yeah.
And I've got 3 children myself. Well, this is 21, so I know the conversations that go on in houses about should you be doing that, or aunties and uncles and grandparents who come in and say, why aren't you doing X, Y, and Z?
Yes.
Well, there comes. Parents might hate me for this, but it's your decision.
Yeah.
I did just tell you this because this is both shocking and slightly amusing from an open day a few years ago, where I had a dad and the daughter, applicants do philosophy, and she was very nice and chatting to her over coffee and biscuits and things. And the dad was there looking very grumpy. And he goes, well, I don't want her to do philosophy, I wanted to do engineering. And I'm like, well, it's very interesting, sir. Are you an engineer? Oh, good God, no, I'm an accountant or something. But I really wanted to be an engineer when I was a boy. So I want her to carry on. And this poor girl was there going, kind of, Dad, oh. And I was possibly, overly forthright with him for about 5 minutes, saying, that is the most terrible thing I've ever heard. And I cannot tell you how bad it is, because, why would you, you don't have the right to tell someone to go and become an engineer just because you wanted to be one. B, how well do you think she's going to do being an engineer when she's no interested in engineering but is interested in philosophy?
Yeah.
What a dreadful 3 years to sentence your supposed child that you love to blah, blah. So, and he was like, oh, well, still think she should be an engineer. But the thing applies, that it is at some point, if you're at school and living with your parents, there is an interrelation, a relationship with them, but eventually you will leave home.
Yeah.
You're doing, it's your life. Sorry, I do believe this.
But it just shows that there could be 100 opinions out there about what the right career path is for you, or the right subject to choose is for you. But it's just. What you're saying is it's down to you and knowing what it is you enjoy.
No, of course. The flip side of that is sometimes people, including your parents or an applicant's parents or student's parents, they will know things simply by having lived through them. And it may be that you say, well, I really want to do A, B or C, and they go, well, actually, we did A, B or C, and there's some things you don't know about it. Now, people do, so I'm not saying don't listen to advice. There's a great deal of difference between drawing upon people as a source of information, advice, insight, wisdom, experience, from the bullying dad saying, well, I jolly well think you ought to do subject X because I did it, or I wish I'd done it. That's a very different thing. That's a great point to make there. That you can draw on experience of others. I mean, a great way you can sort of get a look into what people have experienced at university is the open days, which you've mentioned you worked on. I know you've got some coming up in summer, so I will mention those. They're the 29th of June, 13th of July, and then there's 2 in September, which are the 7th and the 14th. And Mike's been putting a few links on there, and I'll also put the open days links there. So that's just a way to chat to current students and then take a little bit from their experience, and it's great to use people around you. These open days, just to say, these are not philosophy open days, these are university open days where you can go along, hear a talk about all the different subjects that are taught at the university, meet students, talk to those people, see the campus, get a feel for the place, and there's no there's no testing or coming along saying, fill in this, we'll see if we'll make you an offer, because nobody's applied.
Yes,
it's
just
the
a way
start
to experience
of the
uni.
It's an informal, and they're usually, they're good fun and a busy day.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, do you still you usually get free food.
Well, that's always good. Free food and a fun day out.
Free food and a fun day out. That should be the selling point.
Yeah, you should make that the tagline maybe. Great. So Mike's been putting a few of the links there, so you can find those in the comments below. But we'll get back to the questions that we've got here then. The next one we've got coming up is what kind of subjects would you expect applicants to study? Sort of before applying. I know you've talked a little bit that you don't expect them to have studied philosophy. Are there any that are essential or useful?
Right. In the here for doing just philosophy, there isn't any requirement.
Okay.
There's no requirement. It doesn't have to be A levels. It can be BTECs. It can be international baccalaureate. It can be a whole range of qualifications.
Great.
So there's no expectation. If you're doing some combinations, studying philosophy with other things, that may bring in a requirement.
Right.
So if you want to do philosophy and English literature, you have to be doing English lit or language and lit, and you have to get an A level to go on to that. If you want to do philosophy, politics, economics, you have to have a 6, isn't it, GCSE, 6 or 7?
Yes.
I'm still thinking in terms. It used to be a B.
Yeah.
But it's now whatever upper B is. They've gone for the upper B rather than the B plus C. But for single honours philosophy, that just means just doing philosophy. Then there's no requirement, no subject requirement.
Okay.
Its own, and whatever qualifications you are doing, the university makes the offer in terms of those qualifications.
Okay.
So it's not they say, well, hang on, it says online ABB at A level. I'm not doing A levels, I can't apply. Well, when you apply, the university looks at those qualifications and then converts them into, so it might be D star, D, M or something in your BTEC or something that is equivalent to.
Yes.
So it's.
So the university will figure out the equivalent,
Yes.
And there's absolutely no expectation to what it is you study if it's just philosophy.
No,
right?
I mean, I would say that if for people who are doing something that is where their sort of sixth form qualifications are mainly or sometimes entirely practice based,
Right.
then it's possibly worth thinking about the transition to university if they're going to study something that isn't practice based.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something in food science and food technology, which has got a bit of theorising in it, but a lot of stuff that's practice, or doing something in physiotherapy, where again there's a bit of theory, but a lot of it will be focusing on practice, or something like game design. Whether you do a qualification in game design, but again it's aimed at you get your job as a game designer. It's a very different set of skills from the kind of thing that you would be doing in, whether it be a science A level, maths A level, or a history A level, or an English A level, where the sort of academic work is pretty much all the stuff, and there's very little practice or doings at all, except the occasional experiment. At university, studying a humanities subject like philosophy, it's reading, thinking, writing, discussing, all the way through. So it's just
worth thinking about those skills that you'll need.
And to it's not impossible. And people do come with all sorts of qualifications, but it's more about thinking. Well, hang on. Why do I want to do those things? What do I know about them? And will I be prepared to do them when I go?
Great, brilliant. So we've. If you have just tuned in, we've just been chatting a little bit about what subjects an applicant might be expected to study. The answer is that there's no expectation to what it is you study, but there's some great advice there about how you can study things that will match the skills you'll need. So if you are watching after the live session, you can scroll back and find out a bit more about that. I'll just keep an eye on the time. We've got time for a couple more questions, so we'll see what is next up. So the next question is quite simple. What do exams and assessments look like in your subject? You've mentioned a little bit there. Like a piece of paper.
That's the thing. Do. All right. So they do vary depending on the module, the course, the topic. But the kind of rough template for most of the things in our course. If you're doing single honours philosophy, clearly if you're doing philosophy with maths, looks very different because you're doing a lot of maths assignments. If you're doing on the philosophy side of things, most courses are taught by lecture and seminar, and then they have assessment in terms of a written essay, and then an end of year exam.
Okay.
and the marking for most courses, or the assessment weighting, is more of the mark comes from the exam than the coursework. 60-40 usually for most of them.
Right.
Things change slightly in the third year, because in the third year then there are modules where there's no exam, it's just a longer piece of coursework.
Right.
So it goes from being maybe a 2,500 word coursework with a 2-hour exam to now being a 5,000 word end of year dissertation.
Okay.
So, but certainly for the first year and the second year, most of the assessment is written essays on specific philosophical topics to do with that particular module, and then an end of year exam. Usually, if it's a 2-question exam, it'll be a 2-hour exam. If it's a 3-question exam, it'll be a 3-hour exam. And those are again exams where you're writing essay-like answers to a question.
Okay.
Now, if you're doing philosophy with other things, economics or something, or with maths, then those disciplines bring in their own assessment. But on the philosophy stuff, it really is, it's writing.
Okay.
And in order to write those essays, rather than the exams, there's an awful lot of reading, I think.
So a lot of reading,
thinking,
writing and thinking.
Yes, and discussing. And
and if that's your party and so you really enjoy it, then great subject for you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So as you can see, we've got a couple more links up there. If you do want to find out a little bit more about the course and what studying that looks like, what kind of modules you could get into, you can find out a bit more about the weighting of the exams. It's all up there in that link that Mike's already put up there. Brilliant. We'll move on to our next question. So what we have is, are there any work experience opportunities for students?
Yes. So they're coming in sort of different ways. The university and the faculty, there is a placement year option, where you do your third year, so it makes your time at university longer. So you do 2 years. In those first 2 years, alongside your normal course, philosophy, you're also doing additional academic modules to prepare you for applying for a placement. Then in the 4th year, when you come back, you'll then do another module that's sort of accompanying, reflecting on what you've learned from your placement. Now, that scheme is not run by the department, it's run by the faculty, so sort of higher up, covering a lot of different departments. It is competitive, so it's not a guarantee where the university says, come here, do this thing, we'll give you a placement. Rather, it's to support students into applying for a placement. Over the past couple of years, 50% of the students who've completed that, they have got a placement. These are paid placements with graduate employers. But that figure, I would guess, is not likely to continue to be so high because more and more students are applying for placements.
Right.
So when with relatively few students applying for it, your chances of success are going to be higher than projecting forward 2 or 3 years. But I think an awful lot of students are going to be applying for that. So that's one route, and that's quite a substantial commitment because it's a whole year, and it means that you graduate a year after the other people that you started with. Yeah. So there's that. Within the department, there are options. So there's an option in the 3rd year to do something, PPR in education, which is about philosophy of education, which is a schools placement title, not a paid placement, but gain experience in schools. And then there are academic, unpaid, but academic internships in the Richardson Institute, which is a Centre for Peace Studies. And that's why I call that academic internship. It's not making the tea or clearing the desk or something. It's doing, sort of helping doctoral students or postdoctoral researchers on some of the work the Richardson Institute does for external clients. Right. And as an Institute for Peace Studies, one of the main clients is the Ministry of Defence. So it's doing sort of reports and preparing. So it might be going off to do sort of checking up data and getting references and things. But the good thing is that students can then put that on their CV and say, well, actually, I have experience of contributing towards a report that was commissioned by the Ministry of Defence. So if you're interested in the kind of civil service route, that kind of experience, although it's not paid, it's not just doing dull work. It's actually quite interesting work, and you're getting that experience.
Brilliant. So there seems to be a couple of routes there that students can go down, but equally you're well supported by the university to apply for those things.
All the stuff to do with careers and employability is dealt with at a university level rather than departmental level. Right. Because those are the people whose full-time job it is to deal with careers and helping people develop their interview skills, CV writing, letter writing, getting them to go for a job, not a job interview, a kind of careers assessment interview, where you chat with them, fill in a sort of test thing that sees the kind of person you are, says you should definitely not be a surgeon with your fear of blood, and you're not doing medicine. That sort of thing.
Yeah, getting the practice in a bit there. Yeah. Brilliant. So a great chance to develop those skills and experiences for employment later down the line. Brilliant. We do have one last question left in the bowl, which we've got time for. And I think...
what is the meaning of life?
Well, that'll be a difficult one to end on. Typical one. But we've covered a little bit about this when we were talking about entry requirements. It would just be interesting to know, what do you need in order to apply for a place on philosophy? So what are the entry requirements for the course?
So the entry requirements are ABB.
Okay.
Now, here and at many universities, you'll be made an offer even if your predicted grades aren't exactly ABB. That's because universities like to err on the side of caution, and if you can get the grades, then why not make you an offer? That's not the case for all universities, because some universities, their problem is they've only got a very limited number of spaces, and more students want to go there than there are places. So their job is to get rid of as many people as possible and make as few offers as possible. But for most universities outside, maybe 2 or 3, there will be, even if you're not quite predicted the grades, you will be made an offer. Brilliant. Then another thing to bear in mind is that these days, because universities are in a very kind of competitive environment where they're competing with one another, that most universities in August will show or may show a bit of discretion.
Okay.
So, I mean, I've been here 14 years. It used to be that every university had a quota, the university fills up to that quota. If you got one student more than your quota, you were fined for more than the value of that student. So the things universities wanted to avoid was never ever take too many students because it costs. Now it's try and get as many decent students as possible, knowing that everybody else is trying to get as many decent students as possible. So come August, so in the past 2 years, for example, in August in clearing, you've got medical schools, law schools. It never used to be, nobody ever went into clearing in law schools or medical schools. But now there's this, well, we might pick up somebody or poach somebody from another university. And university, if you don't get your grade, they'll be looking at it and go, well, hang on, we want to expand. Well, let's be more flexible. That's not a guarantee, but it's just a fact about applying to university now rather than, say, 10 years ago, where it's actually, there's a bit more flexibility at most universities. Not all universities, there are some universities that you really will have to get the grades to get in, but outside that relatively small number of universities, there's typically, whatever the kind of headline figure is, it's ABB or AAB or AAA, when it comes to the results in August, expect most universities to let you in with having dropped a grade.
Oh, great.
That would be the case. Doesn't mean that if the offer is A star AA, which isn't the offer for us, but and you get BBB, then that university is probably not going to have you. So the leeway is there, but it's not infinite.
Okay, so leeway's there, but it's not infinite.
And it's not an excuse to go, I don't have to worry because that leeway's there.
Yes.
And just one other thing is just that some universities will make conditional offers, and we make conditional offers, which is if you're predicted particularly high grades, the university, again, not just us, lots of universities do this. One thing which I think is just worth noting is that statistically students who made a conditional offer, many of them do less well than they were predicted. Some of them do disastrously less well than they were predicted. So the students come into this university last year on much, much lower than they were anticipating, and the reason is they've got their conditional offer, they've predicted A star, and they've gone, I don't have to worry anymore. And it's a real shame because 20 years down the line, that's the A levels they got. And they were capable of getting more. So just if you do make an unconditional offer in a year or 2 years' time, remember that the A levels do follow you around for as long as you're around.
So remember that they still matter.
Short-term gain,
definitely.
possibly long-term pain.
Brilliant. Okay, so that was it. That was a good one to end on, I think. You can find out more about entry requirements online in the links below, if you wanted to look at any other courses as well. But I'd just like to thank you so much. That's come to the end of our questions.
Yeah,
Thanks for answering all
the
those. Very
empty
empty, I know. Well
Just to
answered.
prove,
Yeah, brilliant. That was some great advice. You can find out more through the links and find out a bit more about the department itself. But thanks again for tuning in, and thank you, Neil, for coming on to answer questions.
Thank you, and thank you for watching.
Brilliant, thank you.